As long as I am alive, I will help you so that you can develop your abilities. But when I am dead, forget about me and do not make any attempts to find me in a world alien to you." This was once warned to one of his students by Wolf Messing, who became famous for his ability to read people's minds and see their fates. The biography of the great hypnotist is unique in itself. He became the firstborn son of a young Jewish Messing family living near Warsaw. The boy was born in 1899 and was named Velvel, which in Yiddish meant howling. Later, after becoming an actor in a traveling circus, he would change his Jewish name to a German one and become Wolf. The boy began to show extraordinary abilities very early. A phrase he accidentally dropped often turned out to be prophetic. The neighbors, calling him a little devil, were afraid of him and tried to avoid the Messing house. His father often beat his son for scaring the villagers with his prophecies, hoping deep down that he would go to study at a theological seminary, become a priest, and settle down. However, Velvel himself strongly disagreed with this prospect and therefore ran away from home, barely reaching the age of 11, and went to Germany. A lonely boy wandered around Berlin, starved and impoverished. By a happy coincidence, he managed to find a job as an animal cleaner at the Cordello Circus. The cheerful and intelligent guy did not stay behind the scenes for long and soon entered the arena. Wolf Messing's artistic career began there, first as a circus clown, then as a fakir, and finally as a clairvoyant and fortune teller. He became really popular and toured almost all of Europe. Everything collapsed when the Nazis came to power in Germany and the persecution of Jews began. Wolf managed to escape through Poland to the Soviet Union. So at the age of 40, he found himself back in an unfamiliar country, without a home or a job. All his numerous relatives disappeared in the Warsaw Jewish ghetto. He began performing at the Belarusian Philharmonic as a magician and very soon gained his former popularity. Gradually, hypnosis and telepathy sessions were added to the usual tricks of the illusionist. Sometimes, during performances, the audience asked the predictor if there was a soul and what awaited a person after death. Messing answered such questions with restraint and caution, and to those who asked him to contact the inhabitants of another world, he said, "I don't communicate with the dead." But in the last years of his life, during his performances, the clairvoyant made exceptions and in rare cases transmitted messages from another world. In addition, Messing said that he began to hear voices that, in his opinion, belonged to the deceased. The predictor described some of these cases in his personal diary. Some viewers came to Wolf Messing's performances to admire his unusual abilities, while others bought a ticket to get confirmation of these abilities. After all, the only way to make sure of this was to ask a question from your life. That's what one of Wolf's viewers did one day. He asked the actor, "Where are my parents now?" After a short pause, the clairvoyant replied that the mother of the spectator was with him in the same hall where Wolf's speech took place. Messing named the place where this woman was sitting, and then added, "And your father died in the war." The man looked at the actor with a stunned look and nodded his head, confirming that everything he said was true. Wolf Messing rarely interacted with the audience after the performance, but at that time, he asked his assistant to bring the viewer who asked the question to his dressing room. Messing wanted to tell him something. When the man was found, the clairvoyant told the man that the voice of his dead father haunted him throughout the performance. The deceased persistently asked Messing to tell his son where he was buried. The clairvoyant named the village where the grave of the deceased was located. Messing had never heard the name of this village before and, of course, had never been to it. Soon, the son of the deceased soldier went to the specified address. A local resident took him to a mass grave, which was located near the village. On the plate with the names, the man found his father's last name. It is also known that Wolf Messing could predict a person's death with precision to the day and hour. He knew the date of his death and the date of his wife's death. According to the clairvoyant, this information came to him from that space or that reality which remains invisible to others. He was saying, "I just focus my attention on the question, and the answer appears in my mind's eye." Sometimes, jokingly, Messing called himself a sighted man living among the mind, because he saw things that couldn't be touched with his hands. The most expensive person for the artist was his wife, Ida Rappaport, who had been assisting her husband at performances for many years. Wolf Messing met her in 1944 while on tour in Novosibirsk. After the performance, there was a knock on his dressing room door. He usually didn't see anyone, and then suddenly a hand reached out to open the door. Ida was standing behind her. She said, "The text that precedes your speech should be different, more scientific." Wolf replied, "Well, you make it up. Can you do it in 2 days? Do you have an evening dress?" Then she said, "Your assistant doesn't need an evening dress. A formal suit will do. After all, these are psychological experiments, not a musical concert." So Ida became his assistant, and then his wife. She took care of him like a child. She was cutting a steak for him on a plate and stirring sugar in a glass of tea. He thought it was perfectly natural. Ida and Wolf never left each other for almost a minute. Ida Mikhailovna took into her own hands not only everyday life, but also all her husband's affairs. She made appointments, made tour schedules, negotiated, agreed, or refused offers. She not only performed with him on stage, but practically led the concert, passing notes from the audience, and sometimes kicking out the audience who tried to insult Messing. Wolf idolized his wife. There was not a single serious hobby in the hypnotist's life either before or after Ida. He simply didn't let women get close to him, and they themselves were afraid to get close to such an astute man. In his presence, most felt uncomfortable knowing that the seer could read their minds. Ida was completely different. She behaved naturally, radiating such warmth that he, exhausted by constant traveling and performing, warmed up with her soul. Experts who studied the Messing phenomenon claimed that his wife had a special gift. She was a medium, that is, a guide between the clairvoyant and the audience present in the hall. Very often, during performances, she mentally conveyed to her husband the requests and orders that people from the audience wrote in notes. Messing performed them flawlessly, and there was not a single case where he misunderstood his wife's thoughts. However, their happiness, which lasted 16 years, was crossed out by Ida's sudden illness. One summer evening in 1960, Wolf Messing was arguing in his kitchen with his wife's doctor, who had been diagnosed with cancer. They spoke in whispers, so as not to disturb the patient's sleep. "As the best oncologist in our country, I tell you that you can live with such a tumor for 10 years, the doctor whispered to Messing. The clairvoyant shook his head and, looking at the doctor with his black eyes, said, "You've probably forgotten who I am. I'm Messing. I can't be fooled. I know that my Ida will leave me soon. It will happen on the 2nd of August at 6 o'clock in the evening." Of course, no one wanted the unfortunate woman dead, but everyone was curious to see if the great soothsayer's prediction would come true this time. His wife died on exactly the day and hour that her husband predicted. Messing did not leave the house that day. His wife was in her room. She didn't want to die in the hospital, but she also didn't want her husband to be with her. Messing's gaze often rested on the tear-off calendar that hung on the wall. Looking at the date, the clairvoyant lowered his head and wiped his tears with a handkerchief. When it was past 6 p.m., he opened the door to his wife's bedroom and walked over to the bed. Ida was no longer breathing, and her eyes stared fixedly at the ceiling. Messing fell to his knees and stared at his wife's face for a long time. Then he closed her eyes. And although Wolf Messing called death just a transition to another world, he grieved over the death of Ida and continued to mourn her for the rest of his life. He also predicted the death of Soviet cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov. That's how Messing himself described it. On the morning of April 6, 1967, a tragic premonition seized me. I went outside, bought some newspapers and saw a message about the successful launch of the Soyuz 1 spacecraft, and next to it a photo of cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov, his biography. Then I suddenly shuddered at the thought. He's not coming back. I wanted to distract myself from this thought, but it haunted me relentlessly. He's not coming back. I should have taken some action right away, make a phone call somewhere. But where to whom, and who will believe me? And anyway, is it possible to stop the flight? A few days later, radio and newspapers reported that Vladimir Komarov had died returning from orbit. But now, let's go back to the warning that Wolf Messing gave his student. The clairvoyant was convinced that the world where the dead live exists, but it is dangerous to communicate with it. Messing told his student, never communicate with the world of the dead. If you cross that line, you will disappear from this world forever. There's no turning back from there. However, at the end of his life, Wolf Messing began to hear some voices. He said they belonged to the dead, although he wasn't entirely sure. It is known that Messing knew the date and time of his death. He called her repeatedly. In 1974, he had a planned operation to replace the iliac and costal arteries. The seer was against the operation, but under pressure from doctors, he agreed. But the day that became the last for the hypnotist was inexorably approaching. It was the last night before the operation. Messing spent it alone, in the apartment where he spent the happiest years of his life with his beloved wife. Messing rejected all offers from friends who wanted to come and support him that night. He said he had to be alone because he had an important conversation ahead of him. Messing did not specify who exactly this conversation should take place with. He didn't sleep that night. What was he thinking about then? Did he regret that he and Ida didn't have children? Or, on the contrary, he was glad that he had no heirs to whom he could pass on his terrible mystical gift. It's probably really scary to know everything in advance, anticipating the death of a loved one whom you love more than anything in the world. Wandering from room to room, Messing mentally talked to his dead parents and recalled his past life. Then he went to the open window and looked up. At that moment, as he himself described to a family friend, Tatiana Longina, who came to visit him in the hospital, Messing felt a light touch on his head. It was like a mother's touch. And I heard a gentle voice. "That's it, my dear. You know everything. I'm finally leaving. Now I can leave you, because we're not parting for long. You'll be following me soon. You've done everything you can here." The next day, Messing was already in the hospital and was waiting for the scheduled operation. His acquaintances came to him and did not recognize the former Messing. His gaze was dull, and his thoughts were dull. The actor kept saying that his life was coming to an end. They tried to cheer the patient up, reminding him that his operation was not dangerous at all. These words did not comfort Wolf Messing. In response, he said, "She told me herself that it would be over soon." "Who is she? A doctor?" they asked Messing. No one knows who I talk to at night, who helps me and gives me strength." At these words, the clairvoyant's gaze lit up with some kind of unearthly light. The operation was successful. It seemed that Messing's predictions about his death would not come true. But soon the patient's kidneys failed, and pulmonary edema began. Doctors were unable to determine the cause of such uncharacteristic postoperative complications and their rapid development. Lying in bed, Messing wrote his last letter. "I will be gone today. I know that for sure. It will be over in 4 hours. I want to run away from this. I want to believe that they will save me. But I have my sad knowledge, which I am already used to. Do not believe someone who says before his death that he is tired of earthly life. She can't get bored. But I'll be gone soon. Goodbye, life, and hello, Ada." By the way, Wolf Messing always spoke of Hades as a living person. He explained to his friends that she had not died but had only left, and that he himself would leave soon too. Reading Messing's recent notes, it may seem that he was afraid of death. However, this is not the case. Death is something that at some stage of life necessarily worries every sane person, especially when his age is already such that this departure will be perceived by the surrounding society as a natural event. And approaching this moment in life without fear, calmly and confidently should be very important for every person. It is possible that such a feeling is given by a clear conscience and a sense of fulfillment, a certain accomplished task for which it was worth living. Messing loved life. He said it was a special experience that would never happen again, because everything that awaits a person beyond this world will be different. During his performances, when someone asked the artist a question about the reincarnation of souls, he replied that this happens extremely rarely and only when the soul has not completed its task. In conclusion, I would like to quote an excerpt from Wolf Messing's book, The Magic of My Brain, which was published in Israel after the death of the visionary based on his personal diary entries. "I can read minds and even see the future. I can inspire things that don't exist, but it won't make me either a demigod or a half-devil. Don't envy me. There's nothing to envy. Don't think that the ability to hypnotize is an enviable thing. No, I used it very rarely myself, only a few times in my life. You might say that my ability to see the future is enviable. Believe me, this is not the case either. I never tell people that they are going to die soon. I try not to report other sad news. What for? It is better that they do not expect troubles and misfortunes. Let them be happy. Most often, a person leaves this world forever. And no matter how good the world that lies ahead is, we will never experience the impressions that we received in this life again. And although we are leaving here irrevocably, the threads that bind us to living people are not breaking. Write in the comments if you previously knew about this outstanding man, and if you believe his words. Recently, some interesting videos were released on my channel. I strongly advise you to watch them. Please don't forget to like this video if you liked it. See you soon.